Good morning, 6AMERS. The 6AMERS began in April 2020 in the heart of the pandemic. Forming this podcast is our way of extending the community and the message of the community into the world. Good morning and welcome to the 6AMERS podcast. My name is Skye Michaels. I'm the host of this podcast and I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Emily Bossert. Good morning, Emily.
Good morning, Skye. I have a question for you this morning.
All right, let's hit it.
Okay. What is one word that describes your relationship to your mother?
Depth.
Wow.
Actually, I'm going to take that one back and I'm going to say impact. My mom, obviously for most of us, your moms change your life. My mom truly, truly changed my life. Everything I am, I attribute to my mom. Everything that I believe, I attribute to my mom. And she taught me lessons from the very beginning of my memory up until today about how to show up in this moment or this way of love. I remember when I had kids and, you were sort of suffering through like the early stages of kids and crying. And one of the things my mom would tell me is that love never killed anything, meaning there's no rules. You can have the kids in the bed with you if they're crying. You can hold them if they're crying. You can nurse them. Well, I can't, but my ex-wife could nurse them if they're crying, right? There was no right or wrong as long as you practice it with love. And I think that's a lesson that I would pull. So when I think of my relationship, I think of the word impact and the impact she had on my life and the way I show up today as a human being. My relationship with my two amazing sisters, and my family and my kids. And there's just so much that I attribute to my relationship with my mom.
We need to make sure your mom hears this.
Oh, yeah. I'm pretty sure she's listening to every one of these podcasts the minute they're released. So on that note, talking of impact, we have a really, really amazing interview today with Nir Eyal. Nir Eyal wrote a book called Indistractable and Hooked. This book is so powerful, especially for all my realtors listening to this. As realtors, we are constantly being distracted. Emily, I know you have a special relationship with this. Can you describe maybe what was your takeaway from this interview?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, Nir gives some really great tips with regards to how to avoid distraction, which I would say we probably all need, especially us as realtors. And it's something that I've always dealt with. I think most of us have dealt with as a species. To give you all a really interesting example, anyone who works with me in Boulder knows that I love my cheesy popcorn. And our incredible office administrator buys me packages of cheesy popcorn, and I proceed to hide them around the office like a little squirrel. And then I forget probably 40 to 50% of those bags. If I could learn more from Nir, I wouldn't forget those bags.
So the mental image of you hiding bags of popcorn, Emily, around the office is just, does anyone ever find these random bags?
Totally. You will hear, every now and then, you'll hear somebody say, why is there a bag of popcorn in this drawer? Why is there a bag of popcorn over here? And I'm like, oh, I forgot about that bag.
That's so great. Well, on that note, in this interview, you're going to hear a lot. And what impacted me was when he really got behind the psychology of why we get distracted and experiences from his personal life that he lives, and how we as realtors, especially our entrepreneurs, can make sure that we live a life of focus and not distraction. So
that's right.
Enjoy this interview and don't get distracted. Nir, good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we're coming in great. And I'm so grateful for you joining us today. I know we've been trying to coordinate this. I apologize. We've been kicking around some dates. And I know, I've been loving reading your background online. And so I'm so thrilled for today. And I wanted to we'll probably ask a couple questions. Then I'm going to allow you to just sort of do your presentation, which I know is going to have massive impact. But Nir, if you don't mind, maybe give everyone just a quick background of who you are before we get into your little presentation.
Sure, absolutely. Great to be here. And unlike most of you, I'm actually not in the States. I'm actually calling in from Singapore. So out here, it is 9 p.m. You're my last call of the day. But this
Amazing.
was I've heard great things about this group, and I figured it was you guys are getting up early, but I'm going to bed late. so, so it's great to be with you today. And I'll tell you a little bit more about my journey and how I came to work on this topic here in the presentation. So is it okay if I share my screen?
That'd be great. Yeah, take it away. Wait, let me okay, I think you're good. Yep, got you.
Okay, so you can see Indistractable now on your.
Yep, Indistractable,
okay,
how to master the skill of the century. I love it.
Perfect. So I'll get going here and definitely stick around. I want to make sure I take questions. That's my favorite part, is to take your questions. So I want to start with this idea that we're going to talk about today about distraction and how do we manage distraction, because I think that becoming indistractable is the skill of the century, and it's something that I came to find so important to me when I had to reassess my relationship with distraction in one specific instance in my life. I was with my daughter one afternoon, and we had this perfect day planned, right? This day for a daddy and a daughter to just hang out and be together. And I remember that we had this book of activities that we could do together, do a Sudoku puzzle and paper airplane contest, all kinds of fun activities we could do together. And one of the activities in the book was to ask each other this question: if you could have any superpower, what superpower would you want? I remember that question verbatim, but I can't tell you what my daughter said, because for whatever reason, I don't even remember, I thought that it was a good time to start checking my phone for God knows what. And by the time I looked up from my device, I realized that my daughter was gone. She had left the room because she had gotten the very clear message that I was sending, that whatever was on my phone was more important than she was. And I realized that I blew it. And if I'm honest with you, it didn't just happen that one time, and it didn't just happen with my daughter. It would happen with my physical health. When I would tell myself, today's the day I'm definitely going to exercise, I'm definitely going to eat right, but I didn't and I wouldn't. At work, I would say, okay, I've got those big priorities. I got to make those sales calls. I got to get to work. I got to go through my to-do list. And yet somehow 20, 30, 45 minutes later, the things I said I was going to do was not what I was doing. I was doing everything but the things that I said I was going to do. Why? So if you asked me today what superpower I would most want, I would tell you it's the power to be indistractable. Becoming indistractable is the skill of the century. There is no area of your life that doesn't depend upon the ability to sustain your attention. Being able to decide how you control your attention is truly how we control our lives. We should know that this is not a new challenge. I know we like to think that it's our devices that create all this distraction. It's the pings and dings and beeps and boops, but it turns out that distraction has been with us since time immemorial. In fact, the Greek philosopher Plato talked about akrasia, the tendency that we all have to do things against our better judgment. And if people have been struggling with distraction for at least the past 2,500 years, before the internet, before Facebook, before SMS, before the iPhone, this can't be a problem that's caused by our technologies. In fact, the problem goes much, much deeper. So what I want to offer you is a way to understand distraction, not at the surface level. This is where most people stay with distraction. They blame it on their devices. They blame it on the external world. They blame and blame and blame, but they don't look deeper into why we get distracted in the first place. So here's what I want to offer you. I want to offer you a new understanding of what this word distraction really means. The best way to understand what distraction is to understand what distraction is not. What is the opposite of distraction? Most people think the opposite of distraction is focus, right? I don't want to be distracted. I want to be focused. But that's not actually the opposite. That's not the antonym of distraction. If you look at the origin of the word, the opposite of distraction is traction. That both words come from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull. And you'll notice that both words, traction and distraction, end in the same 6 letters, A-C-T-I-O-N, that spells action, reminding us that distraction is not something that happens to us, but rather it is an action that we take. So traction, by definition, is any action that pulls you towards what you said you were going to do, things that you do with intent. I love how Emily said that the word of the day is intention. That's so perfect. Traction is anything you do with intent, what you decided to do, actions that move you closer to your values and help you become the kind of person you want to become. The opposite of traction is, of course, distraction. Distraction is any action that pulls you further away from what you plan to do, further away from your intentions, further away from your values, and further away from becoming the kind of person you want to become. Now, we've got traction, we've got distraction. Now we have to understand what prompts us to take these actions that either move us closer to what we want to do or away from. Here we have two kinds of triggers. The first kind of trigger we call an external trigger. You'll be very familiar with. These are the pings and dings and rings, anything in our outside environment that can lead us towards traction or distraction. This is what people tend to blame, right? They say, oh, I was going to make that sales call, but then my phone rang and I had to do something else. Or I was playing with my kids, but then I got distracted by the television, or whatever the case might be. We blame the things outside of ourselves, the external triggers. But here's the fascinating bit. It turns out that studies find that external triggers only account for 10% of the reason we get distracted. 10% of the time, and studies have found this, that 10% of the time that you get distracted, it's because of an external trigger. Well, what's the other 90%? It turns out the other 90% of the time that we get distracted, it's not because of what's happening outside of us, but rather it's because of what's happening inside of us. These are called internal triggers. What are internal triggers? Internal triggers are uncomfortable emotional states that we seek to escape from. And it is overwhelmingly the reason that we go off track, because we are trying to escape an uncomfortable sensation. Boredom, loneliness, fatigue, uncertainty, stress, anxiety. This is 90% of the time that we get distracted. It is a desire to escape discomfort. And so that means that if human behavior is prompted by a desire to escape discomfort, that means, therefore, that time management is pain management. Let me say that again. Write it down. Time management is pain management. Unless we understand what is it, what is that discomfort that we are looking to escape, we will always find a way to escape one way or another. Whether it's too much news, too much booze, too much football, too much Facebook, we're going to find a way to distract ourselves if we don't understand the root cause of why we are getting distracted in the first place. So that's the first step to becoming indistractable. It's about understanding and mastering those internal triggers so that they don't become our masters. How do we do that? Well, there's a lot of things that we can do right off the bat. So I can't go through everything in my book. There just isn't time for it. But I want to give you some very actionable techniques that you can use starting today to help you become indistractable. One of the ways that psychologists tell us that we can begin to master our internal triggers is to note the sensation. That's simply the act of writing down what it is that we are feeling. What is that internal trigger that we are experiencing? Whether it's boredom, loneliness, stress, anxiety, fatigue, whatever the case might be, simply noting it down is a great first step. The next step is to get curious about that sensation, not contemptuous. Okay, this is a really important point. Most people, when it comes to distraction, they fall into two camps. We call them blamers and we call them shamers. The blamers, they blame things outside themselves. Oh, it's Facebook. Oh, it's my cell phone. It's the news. It's how crazy the world is these days. They blame all this stuff outside themselves, right? But that's futile because that stuff's not going away, folks, right? Those things are not going anywhere. We can't step back into a time machine, into some mythical age where we didn't have distraction. As we all know, as I told you earlier, Plato was struggling with distraction. Distraction will always be with us. So we can't blame the things outside of us. The other camp are the shamers, right? These are the folks like I used to be that take it on the inside. And here's what this sounds like. I'm no good with time management. I have an addictive personality. I have a short attention span. They shame themselves. And of course, shame is a very palpable, uncomfortable internal trigger. Shame feels horrible. And so what do we do to escape shame? We look for relief with, guess what? More distraction. So that doesn't work either. We don't want to be blamers. We don't want to be shamers. We want to be claimers. What do claimers do? Claimers realize that you don't control these emotions. You don't control these internal triggers, right? Any more than you would control the urge to sneeze. You can't control the urge to sneeze. Once you feel the urge to sneeze, it's too late. You already felt that urge. You don't control these urges. What you do control, what you do have responsibility over, is how you will respond to those urges, hence the term responsibility. So when you feel the urge to sneeze, what do? The responsible thing to do is to take out a tissue and cover your face. That's the responsible thing to do. The same goes with our sensations. It's not your fault that you have stress, anxiety, fatigue, loneliness, boredom. It doesn't matter. Those sensations are not your fault, but how you will respond to them is your responsibility. So by understanding that what is in your control and what is not in your control, you can take steps to do something about it. Starting with using this technique that we call surfing the urge. Surfing the urge acknowledges that these uncomfortable emotions, these internal triggers, they're like waves. They crest and then they subside. And we can ride these waves just like a surfer on a surfboard. So one of the techniques that I use almost every single day is called the 10-minute rule. This is a fantastic technique I'd love to share with you. So I've been writing professionally for over a decade. Let me tell you, writing never gets easy. It is always hard work. At least it is for me. All I want to do when I'm writing is go check email or Google something or go see what's happening in the news or scroll Instagram. There's a million distractions that I would love to do rather than doing the thing I said I was going to do. So what do I do when I feel that urge to get distracted? I take a second and I implement the 10-minute rule. The 10-minute rule says that you can give in to any distraction, but not right now, in 10 minutes. Okay. Why does this work so well? Because we know that strict abstinence backfires, right? We've all been told, just say no. If you want to, don't eat that chocolate cake or don't smoke that cigarette or don't check your email, we just say no to it. And it turns out that can actually backfire. That abstinence, in fact, when we think about abstinence, it's almost like pulling on a rubber band. If you pull on a rubber band, you pull until you can't pull anymore. And then what does the rubber band do when it snaps? It doesn't go back to where it started. No, it ricochets across the room. And so by telling yourself, no, don't do something, when you finally give into it, you are reinforcing the very behavior you don't want to do because you're relieving the discomfort of telling yourself no. So instead of telling yourself no, tell yourself not yet. And this technique works if you're on a diet and you're trying to resist that chocolate cake, or you're trying to make those sales calls or work on a big project or write that blog post, whatever the case might be, whatever you get distracted while you're doing. If you tell yourself, I'm going to continue doing this for just 10 more minutes, or I can surf the urge by just taking a second, right? Just taking a deep breath and sitting with that sensation, asking yourself, I teach you how to have this dialogue with yourself of what is it that you're experiencing? Where is this internal trigger coming from? And in the book, Indistractable, I walk you step by step how to have this conversation with yourself so that you can surf the urge long enough for it to crest and then subside. And what you will find is 9 times out of 10, when you use this 10-minute rule, by the time your timer rings, you won't even have that craving anymore. It's a fantastic technique anybody can apply today. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are dozens of more techniques that we can use, but for the sake of time, I want to move on to the next step of becoming indistractable, making time for traction. So after we identify those internal triggers and we master them so they don't become our masters, the next step is to make time for traction. We talked about how traction is all about these actions that move us closer to our goals, closer to our intentions, closer to our values. If we want to achieve those acts of traction, we have to make time for them. Here's the thing. Okay, another thing I want you to write down. I'm telling you to write this down, by the way, because we know studies have found when you write something down, you're much more likely to remember it. So one thing I want you to remember is that you cannot call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. Let me say that again. You cannot call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. I cannot tell you how many people I've worked with over the years who tell me, oh, for some reason, I'm no good at time management. I can't get everything I wanted to get done. The world is so distracting. My kids wanted this. My boss wants that. My client said this. Did you see what happened in the news? And then I say, okay, wait. What did you get distracted from today? Well, look at my to-do list. It's a mile long. No, that's not the question. The question was, what did you get distracted from today? What did you plan to do with your time? Show me your calendar. And you know what I oftentimes see? Nothing. Blank space. The vast majority of people out there do not plan their day. And so what's the result? If you don't plan your day, someone will plan it for you. The days of being spontaneous are gone. If you want to do things that you're not getting done, and by the way, I'm not telling you how to spend your time. However you want to spend your time is fine. But if you're not doing the things you want to do, if you're not spending quality time with your family, if you're not making time with your friends, if you're not achieving what you say you're going to achieve at work, if you're not reading the books you say you're going to read, if that isn't happening in your life, you have to plan the time or somebody is going to plan it for you. There are too many vested interests out there between the media and your work and your kids and all the people who want your time. If you don't decide in advance what you're going to do with your time, you can't say you got distracted. So we have to use this technique called time boxing, which is simply planning out what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. And it's such a simple technique that has been validated in thousands of peer-reviewed studies have found that this simple technique is incredibly effective at helping you stay on track. So we have to make time for traction by planning the time, not the output. I would like to officially kill this sacred cow that most of us have around the proper way to manage our time, which is using this antiquated technique called running your life on a to-do list. To-do lists are one of the worst things you can do for your personal productivity. And to be more specific, I'm not talking about taking stuff out of your brain and putting it on a piece of paper. That's a great idea. Nothing wrong with that. What I'm rallying against is this technique that we've been taught that you wake up in the morning, you look at your to-do list and you do whatever's on your to-do list and you check off all those cute little boxes. Well, here's the thing. To-do lists are horrible for your productivity for a few different reasons. Number one, there's no constraint, right? You can add more and more and more and more and more to a to-do list. There's no constraint. There's no end. So what happens? You work like crazy. You're busy all day long. And then you get home at the end of the day and you look at your to-do list and you still haven't finished a bunch of things on that list. And so what does that do to your psyche? What does that do when you look at that to-do list and you still didn't finish the things you said you were going to do? Loser. Day after day, week after week, month after month, that begins to take a psychic toll, right? So as opposed to measuring yourself based on how many cute little boxes you checked off, we need to start measuring ourselves not by the output, but by the input. What is your input? Time and attention. That's it. That's it. So what I want you to do from now on is to measure yourself based on one metric. Did you do what you said you were going to do for as long as you said you would without distraction? I'll say that again. Did you do what you said you were going to do for as long as you said you would without distraction? And I don't care what that is. It could be meditation, prayer, going on a walk, playing with your kids, playing video games for all I care. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is you said you were going to do, did you do it without distraction? It turns out that people who use this simple technique of time boxing their intentions and simply tracking, did they work without distraction? Not did they finish? That's not the goal, but did they work without distraction for as long as they said they would? Here's the kicker. Those people finish more. They are actually more productive than the people who use this lame to-do list technique that makes us feel nothing but horrible. Much better technique. So by planning the time, not the output, that's a key step to making time for traction. Another thing we have to do is to spend less time communicating and more time concentrating. Listen, folks, there are two kinds of work. There's what we call reactive work and reflective work. Okay. Reactive work is how most people spend most of their day. Okay. It's all about reacting to client meetings, reacting to phone calls, reacting to text messages. I get it. It's part of your day. Everybody has to have some time for reactive work. Low performers spend their entire day doing reactive work. High performers make time for reflective work. What is reflective work? Reflective work is the kind of work that can be done only without distraction. Planning, strategizing, thinking, for God's sakes, requires you to reflect without distraction. So I'm not saying your whole day needs to be spent in a cave without distraction. No, quite the opposite. You have to have time in your day for reactive work. But if you spend your entire day being told what to do based on every ping, ding, and ring, you will have no time for reflective work and you will be spending your entire life running real fast in the wrong direction. High performers make some time in their day for concentrated work. Even if it's 30, 45 minutes, that's fine. Make sure you put time in your day to think. Now, part of the problem with all this communicating is that it comes coupled with what we call external triggers, these pings, dings, rings in our outside environment that can so often lead us towards distraction. Now, there is one industry where distraction is literally a matter of life and death. If I were to ask you, what are the three leading causes of death in the United States of America before COVID? What are the three leading causes of death? I'll give you the first two. Number one is heart disease. Number two is cancer. The third leading cause of death pre-COVID, believe it or not, was prescription mistakes. Prescription mistakes would have been the third leading cause of death pre-COVID. Now, this is a 100% preventable human error. This is patients in hospitals getting the wrong medication from healthcare practitioners, doctors and nurses giving them the wrong dosage of medication inside healthcare facilities. Why does this happen? Most hospitals in America just said, well, what are you going to do? It's the cost of doing business. People make mistakes, right? Until a group of nurses at UCSF decided to take on this problem and figure out what the heck was going on. Why are so many Americans being harmed because healthcare practitioners are giving them the wrong medication? And lo and behold, they came up with a solution that reduced the number of prescription mistakes by 88%. 88%. They almost eliminated the problem completely. And the solution wasn't some multi-million-dollar technology. It was something as simple as plastic vests. Plastic vests that these nurses would wear that told their colleagues, drug round in progress, do not disturb. That's all it took. And they almost eliminated this problem of dosing out the wrong medication, because it turns out the source was that when nurses were giving out these medications, they were distracted, right? Their colleagues would come up and tap them on the shoulder. Their patients would ask them something and they would make mistakes. And the terrible thing here is that they didn't even realize that they were making these mistakes until something disastrous had happened. And you say, well, I'm not in healthcare. That doesn't affect me. Here's the thing. Here's the point. Why am I telling you this story? I know that you're not in healthcare. I'm telling you this story because we don't even realize how much our performance suffered until it's too late. We don't realize that we could do so much better if we could work without distraction, just as these nurses realized how much better they could work with if they could work without distraction. So I know you're not in the healthcare profession, but anybody can use this technique. If you're in the office, for instance, in every copy of my book, there is this screen sign, a piece of cardstock you pull out, you fold it into thirds, and you can put it on your computer monitor for that reflective work time, the 20, 30, 45 minutes in your day when you need time to work without distraction. You can put this screen sign on your monitor to tell your colleagues in the office, this is time when I need to work without distraction. I know many, many of us are working from home right now. Well, what do we do when we're working from home? What if it's our kids that are a distraction, right? So this is a picture of my wife, Julie, and she is wearing what you see there is called, in my household, the concentration crown. The concentration crown is an amazing way to tell children, if you work at home and you have kids at home, that you cannot be disturbed. So when my daughter was only 6 years old, we sat down with her and we said, look, when mommy is wearing the concentration crown, for that time, she cannot be disturbed. Okay. And she will be with you within 30 minutes. So unless somebody's bleeding, that's the rule in my household, unless somebody's bleeding, do not interrupt mommy when she has the concentration crown on. It works with 6-year-olds incredibly well. It also works with husbands incredibly well, because when I see Julie with a concentration crown, I know, okay, time to leave her alone. So what this does is essentially interrupt the interruption. Incredibly effective technique. There's also things that we can do on our devices, right? So everybody's phone today comes with this amazing feature called Do Not Disturb While Driving. If you haven't used this feature, it's on every Android, on every iPhone, has this feature called Do Not Disturb While Driving. Here's how it works. When you engage this feature, this Do Not Disturb While Driving, you push it with one button. You can see in the middle screen at the bottom right, we push one button, and if someone texts or calls you, they will receive an automatic reply that says whatever you want it to say. This automatic reply, in my case, says, I'm sorry, I can't talk right now. I'm indistractable. If this is urgent, text the word urgent, and then the message will get to you. Okay, does that make sense? So if someone calls or texts you, they'll get this automatic reply that says, I can't talk right now, but if this is urgent, text me with the word urgent. So if it is, oh my God, your house is on fire, your client is a wreck, and really needs to talk to you, it's urgent, it's an emergency, it's going to come through. This is so important because so many people say, well, I can't work without distraction. I'm in the service business. I need to be available for my clients 24/7. Look, I've used this technique for over 3 years now. People realize when they get the auto reply, okay, he'll call back in 30 minutes. People can wait 30 minutes for you to do your focused, reflective work. They know you'll get to them very soon, especially when they get this message that says you cannot be disturbed right now. But if you still have that internal trigger of, whoa, what if somebody needs me? No problem. If it is actually urgent, then the call or text message will come through. Another thing we can do is to clear all this cognitive clutter. How many of us have desktops that look like this? I certainly used to. All this crap on our desktops, studies have found has a deleterious effect on your focus and your concentration. We don't have to live this way. Clear away all that clutter. Give yourself the mental space. Put an inspirational quote on your desktop and do away with all that cognitive clutter, all that mess, all that noise. We know we perform better when we don't have all that visual clutter. Our cell phones, get this statistic. 2/3 of people with a smartphone, 2/3 of people with a smartphone never adjust their notification settings. Can we really complain that technology is hijacking our brain, that we're all so addicted to technology that's so distracting when we haven't even taken 5 minutes to change those notification settings by asking ourselves, which trigger is serving us and which am I serving? So if that external trigger is serving you, let's say it's a notification that says, hey, it's time for a meeting that you plan. It's time to go exercise. It's time to do whatever it is you said you were going to do that's in your time box calendar. Great. That trigger is serving you. But if you get that ping, ding, or ring when you plan to do something else, just as was the case when I was with my daughter and what I wanted to do was to be with someone I love very much. And now I got this notification. Well, that's my fault, right? I didn't ask myself which triggers are serving me and which am I serving. If it prompts you towards distraction, you are serving the trigger. The trigger is not serving you. So take just a few minutes. I tell you exactly how to do this. You can do this in less than an hour and make sure you adjust those notification settings. Takes just a little bit of time, yields huge benefits. Another thing we need to do is to leave distracting devices outside of our meetings, whether it's in a corporate context, whether it's in a family gathering. We need to have what I call no phone zones. One of my no phone zones is around the dining table, right? When my family gets together, we're going to have a meal. That's a no phone zone. We put our phones on the charging station so that we can have a conversation. Meetings, the same way. I've done thousands of presentations. Let me tell you, when I do these workshops, when I used to do them in person, I would fly into a meeting and we'd have, they'd pay me to come in and teach them how to be Indistractable. And who would be the person in the back of the room in the corporate setting who would be on their phones? It would always be the big boss, right? The big boss sets the company culture. I'm too important. I need to be on my device all day and night. Well, what you're doing is essentially setting that culture for the rest of your organization. So it's very important that we reclaim these meetings so that they're not zombie meetings. Zombie meetings are when we have people present in the meeting, but their brains are somewhere else. It's just warm bodies in the room, right? So we have to leave those distracting devices out of certain places and create these no phone zones, or else let's not just meet, right? What's the point if we're not going to be fully present? The last step to becoming indistractable is to prevent distraction with pacts. So this is what we do after we've mastered the internal triggers, made time for traction, hacked back the external triggers. The last step is to prevent distraction with pacts. And this utilizes an ancient technique that's over 2,500 years old. It comes to us from the story of Ulysses, written by the Greek philosopher Homer, who tells us about Ulysses' journey past the island of the Sirens. Ulysses has to sail his ship past the island of the Sirens, who are these mythical creatures who sing this magical song, and any sailor who hears the siren song crashes his ship onto the shore of the Sirens Island and dies. Now, Ulysses knows about this threat. He knows about this distraction. He doesn't want to get distracted by the siren song. So what does he do? He tells his crew to put beeswax in their ears so that they can't hear the siren song. And then he instructs them to bind him to the mast of the ship. And he tells them, no matter what I do, no matter what I say, do not let me go. Okay. He takes this pre-commitment, what today we call a Ulysses pact. And guess what? It works. He's able to sail his ship right past the Sirens Island and return his crew and his ship safely home. So what's the point of the story? How can we apply this in our own lives? We can make these Ulysses pacts as well, because you in this story are Ulysses. There's lots of distracting stuff out there, especially on the internet. And of course, that could be you as well, dead on the shore of the Sirens Island. So how can you make these pacts in your own life? What can you do? Well, turns out we can actually use tech to block out distracting tech. Here are two examples of products that I use almost every single day. On your right is an app called Self-Control. It's totally free that will block out certain distracting websites that you choose at certain times of day or night. On the left-hand side is another app that I use almost every day. It's an app my daughter uses all the time as well. It's called Forest. Here's how Forest works. You take out this app, you dial in how much focused work you want to do, let's say 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever the case might be. And if you pick up your phone and you do anything with it, you see that cute little virtual tree that gets planted? If you pick up your phone when you said you wouldn't, that virtual tree dies. It gets chopped down. And you don't want to be a virtual tree murderer. So it's enough of a reminder to tell you, oh, that's not what you want to do right now. You made a pact with yourself. You made a promise. And it's enough to remind you to put down your phone and get back to that focused work that you wanted to do. Another thing that we can do, many of us are working from home today. We can use technology to help us stay on track. There's a wonderful website that I love so much. I actually invested in the company. It's called focusmate.com. Here's how Focusmate works. Let's say you're one of these folks like I am that really has trouble getting started in the morning. I say, okay, 8 a.m. I'm good. I mean, I know this group, you guys get up at 6 a.m., but many times when I have a day that I say, okay, I'm going to work on a project, I really got to focus. I got to knock out some important things so I can't get distracted. But getting started is tough sometimes, right? Instead of working on that big project, maybe you scroll the news for 15, 20 minutes, maybe you check email for a little bit, but you really wanted to get started at that time. So to keep you on track, you log into focusmate.com. You see there on the left-hand side, you can book a time with another person. And when you log back in, you see this little screen, this little picture of someone you're matched with. This is your Focusmate. This was an example on the right-hand side. This was a student in the Czech Republic who was memorizing human anatomy as a med school student. Meanwhile, I was working on this presentation. And that pact that you're making with another person, that pre-commitment, that Ulysses pact of that person's working on what they're working on, you're working on what you're working on. It sounds so simple, but it is incredibly impactful. Very simple technique, really does work well to have a buddy, an accountability buddy, to make sure that you stay on track. So the idea here is to reduce distraction with pacts. There's all kinds of other pacts we can use against it. Again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. But the idea here is to use tech to block out distraction. But let me give you one word of warning, that this technique is something you need to be aware of because it can backfire. These pacts have been known to backfire with certain types of people who do not give themselves self-compassion. Okay. Self-compassion has been found to be a critical trait in people who accomplish their long-term goals. Well, how do we cultivate self-compassion? It turns out we cultivate self-compassion by talking to ourselves the way we would talk to a good friend. Maybe the way you would talk to me if I told you about what had happened with my daughter. If I told you that I felt bad, that I was embarrassed about how I got distracted when I meant to play with someone I love very much, spending quality time with her, would you tell me that I'm a horrible human being? Would you tell me that I'm a terrible father? Not if you were my good friend, you wouldn't. And yet that's exactly the kind of thing that I was telling myself. And it wasn't true, and it wasn't helpful. And here's what else isn't helpful. This idea that technology is hijacking our brains, that there's nothing we can do about it. The technology is just too much for us to control. Rubbish. Any distraction we can overcome. And there's so much we can do about it. We master the internal triggers. We make time for traction. We hack back the external triggers. And finally, as a last step, we prevent distraction with pacts. So the message I want to leave with you today is that we can become indistractable. This is the cover of my book. There's a whole lot more here that we didn't have time for because I wanted to make sure we had some time for Q&A as well. But I hope you'll check it out. There's a whole chapter on how to raise indistractable kids. There's a whole section on how to have an indistractable workplace and how to build indistractable relationships. So I hope you'll check it out. And before I go, the last thing I want to reinforce is that we can do this. We can get the best out of these tools without letting them get the best of us. We all can become indistractable. And with that, I have a very quick favor to ask. If you'd be so kind to either go to this URL, opinion2.us, or if you have your phone, you can just zap that QR code with your camera. and it'll take you to a very short survey. It's only 5 questions. Would love to know what you thought of the presentation. I read all your feedback, so please let me know what you thought. And the reward, if you will, if you wouldn't mind taking the 30 seconds to fill out that quick survey, just 5 questions, you'll get the slides that you just saw. So if you'd like to share them with a family member or a colleague, please feel free. And if we don't get time for your question today, I know there's a lot of folks attending today. If I don't get time for your question, you can see my my website right there is nirandfar.com. And Nir is spelled like my first name, Nir. And feel free to reach out to me. There's a contact form there. If you'd like, you can email me at nirandfar.com. Happy to take your questions later on, or we can open it up right now.
Nir, this is incredible. It's so funny because it's almost like every time you hit a point, I wish I had like a little bell I could have rung in my head. Like it was like ding, ding. But that was an incredible presentation.
I'm so glad. Thank you.
God. Emily, do you have a question? Maybe that came up in your mind?
For me, it's not Nir that I had any questions. It was that you were speaking directly to me. And I think that you're speaking directly to so many of us. But this is something that I grapple with or struggle with on a daily basis. And it's so timely. I just appreciate this so much.
Thank you. Well, listen, Emily, you are part of a very illustrious club of people who struggle with distraction. I got to tell you a little secret. I didn't write this book for my readers. I wrote this book for me. Right? I needed the answer to this. And everything else I read out there had these solutions, stop using technology. Well, God, that's not very practical. I need it for my job, right? Like I can't stop using email. That's not a practical solution. So I really wanted a solution that helps us get the best of these tools without letting them get the best of us. And I really do think we can get there. I mean, I can't tell you how many areas of my life have completely changed. I'm 43 years old. I used to be clinically obese. I've never been in better shape now. For the first time in my life, I actually exercise consistently because I don't get distracted from exercise. I'm more productive at work than I've ever been before. I have a better relationship with my family, my friends, simply because I do what I say I'm going to do. That's all it takes.
I see Rosie, I see a hand raised. Feel free to unmute, or if you want to put your question.
Hi, thank you so much. So if walking away from this today, first of all, thank you. This was amazing. Walking away from this today, if we needed like something to help us get started with some of the tools we already have and what we learned from you, like what would you say we should focus on to really make this take in our lives?
Yeah, terrific question. So there's a lot in this presentation. I realize that. There's even more in the book, but the most important tip I can give you is to do one small thing from each of these 4 strategies. What's one thing you can do to master those internal triggers? What's one small thing that you can do to recognize that discomfort that you feel that precedes the distraction, right? Anybody can do that. Can you write down, you know what? I got distracted. It was because I was feeling stressed or anxious. Just noting that sensation. Anybody can do that. The 10-minute rule we talked about. Anybody can do that. Making time for traction, right? Maybe you don't want to plan out your entire 7-day week. I get it. It takes some time to do that. Maybe it takes 30, 45 minutes. How about planning one afternoon? If it's not something you currently do, can you time box just one afternoon? Hacking back those external triggers. Can you take 5 minutes and figure out, hey, what are the external triggers that are maybe on my phone or in my outside environment? One small thing I can do to hack back an external trigger. And then finally, how can I prevent distraction with some kind of pact? Is there some small thing I can do to prevent getting distracted? Some kind of firewall I can erect as that 4th and final step. So that would be my best piece of advice, is to do one small thing from each of these 4 strategies. And what you'll find is, as you build up that confidence, as you build up your self-efficacy that, hey, I really can do this, you'll start to do more and more and more.
Incredible. Mary Frances, I see you're up next with a hand raised. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much. That was amazing.
Sure, my pleasure.
My life has been all about this distraction thing. So my question is, because we're in the service industry, we're very focused on, taking care of the whole client. And I think what I struggle with on when I can't take a call is that I'm not, readily available. So, but then I lose the moment of what I'm working on. So do you ever work with realtors or brokers about, kind of compartmentalizing your day? So like you have office hours from, 1 to 3, and then you use Calendly. I mean, Skye's helped me a lot with Calendly. Like, schedule a call with me or call me at such and such time. Like, can you talk a little bit about compartmentalization and how that could work well?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So that's exactly what time boxing does for us. That I'm not saying spend your entire day in super focus mode. You need to spend some of your time on call and available for your clients. So when I work with folks in the real estate industry, what I advise is to have at least some time in their day for that reflective work, right? Sometime when you can plan, strategize, think about what direction your business is going, what direction your life is going. Have that time in your day to do that work that you can only do without distraction. But for the rest of the time, plan to be on call, right? So that the first job that you have from this hour to this hour is that my job is when my clients need me, I'm available. That's part of my day. But without blocking out and protecting and keeping that time sacred for reflective work, it's the first thing to go. Because many people, what we find, one of the characteristics in the studies that we did around low performers is that low performers tend to let their entire day be controlled by this reactive work. They don't make any time for reflective work. And part of the reason is that it's easy, right? You don't have to think when you let your phone dictate what to do next. You don't have to think when you let your clients or your manager or whoever tell you what to do. And many people get into this rut of always letting things outside them tell them what to do with their time, because it does require a bit of effort. You have to think for a second and say, wait, what do I actually want to do with my time? That takes a little bit of effort. But that's really the defining trait between low performers and high performers, and getting the most out of your day is making at least some time in that day and protecting it, keeping it sacred to do that reflective work.
Awesome.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
And Nir, just one of the things I picked up on as well on this topic is also the self-compassion, right? When you mess up, we don't need to beat ourselves up. Like, it's going to happen. We're going to get distracted and not to go into this shame mode. Like, oh my God, I'm horrible.
Yes.
Horrible.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. Thank you so much for saying that. This is so important. So I want to make sure I clarify something. Everyone gets distracted. Okay. I wrote the book Indistractable. I still get distracted from time to time. But here's the thing. So I made up this term. Indistractable is not a real word. I made it up. So I get to define it any way I want. So what does it mean to be indistractable? Being indistractable doesn't mean you never get distracted. That's impossible. Being indistractable means you understand why you got distracted so that you do something about it. Okay. So Paulo Coelho has a wonderful quote. He said, "A mistake repeated more than once is a decision." Let me say that again. A mistake repeated more than once is a decision. Distractible people keep getting distracted by the same thing again and again. How many times can we blame our phone? How many times can we blame Facebook? How many times can we blame Twitter or the news, whatever, before we say enough? Enough. I'm not going to let the same distraction keep distracting me. An indistractable person says, okay, you got me once. Okay, I got distracted, but what am I going to do about it? Am I going to master the internal triggers? How can I make time for traction? How am I going to hack back those external triggers? And how am I going to prevent distraction with the pact? I know why I got distracted, and I'm not going to let it happen again, because I'm going to use these 4 techniques to prevent it happening in the future. So now I'm choosing to be indistractable rather than distractible.
Amazing. Betty, I see. Yeah, we'll end on Betty's question and take us home, Betty.
Thank you. Nir, that was absolutely fabulous. I'm a to-do list person over and over and over again. And yes, it keeps getting longer and pages. How do you said it's okay to write things down to remember, but how do you balance the to-do and how do you put it all together so you get things done still?
You're halfway there. So it's a good idea to get things out of your head and put them on paper. That's a great idea, or in an app. That's terrific. Mm-hmm. Most people keep them there. And the thing we have to do is to make sure we put them on our schedule. So when we have them in our schedule, now we know the difference between what is traction, anything we plan to do with our time, and everything else suddenly becomes a distraction. So the reason that time boxing is so effective, and the technique that we didn't get to it in this presentation, but what I talk about in the book is around starting with our values. What we have to do is turn our values into time. Okay, turning your values into time. You know, most people are stingy with their money and liberal with their time, right? We clip coupons, we split checks with lunch with our friends, we look for the best deal we could possibly find. But here's the idiocy of this: we can always make more money. We can always make more money. You cannot make more time. right? I don't care if you're Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates. It doesn't matter how much money you have. They all have the same 24 hours in a day. So it should be the opposite. We should be generous with our money, but stingy with our time, because you cannot make more time. So just as people, how many people have budgets, right? They plan every dollar they're going to spend. Well, we also need to do that with our time, more so with our time, because we can't make more of it. So by starting with your values, by asking yourself, how would the person I want to become spend their time? And so I separate into these 3 life domains, starting with you. You are the most important person in your life. If you can't take care of yourself, can't take care of others, you can't make the world better. So you've got to make sure the first thing you do on your calendar is make time for you. So ask yourself, what are my values when it comes to taking care of myself? Is exercise important? By the way, I'm not saying it has to be. It's whatever you think is important. But if you say, hey, exercise is important, physical health is important, learning is important, whatever it is that's important to you, put that time in your schedule. I'll give you a great example. We all know, we've all heard to death about how important sleep is, right? Hasn't everybody heard how important sleep is? I have a daughter today. She's 13 years old. And for years, we told her, you have to have a bedtime. Get to bed. You need a bedtime. But did I have a bedtime? Nope. What kind of hypocrite was I, right? I'm telling my daughter she has to have a bedtime because it's so important for your brain to get rest. And I didn't have a bedtime. Well, today I have a bedtime. It's in my calendar because that's important. It's one of my values to get proper rest. So that's the first life domain is you. So put that in first. Everything that it's important to do for yourself. Hey, and do the fun stuff too. Whether it's, you want to play video games or scroll Facebook. Great. Do it. Put it on your calendar. The next domain is relationships. Okay. Put time in your schedule for those regular relationships in your life. Part of the reason that we have a loneliness epidemic in our country is that people don't have those common reoccurring events to get together with on social occasions. And this isn't something that happened with social media. This has been happening for decades. The decline of the bowling league, the Kiwanis Club, the church group, we need those regular occasions in our calendar. So whether it's your friends, your family, put that time in your schedule. Don't give these loved ones just scraps of time or whatever's left over. Put it in your calendar. And then finally, the work domain. That's the third life domain. And this is where we talked about reflective work and reactive work, putting that time in your schedule so that you have the right balance of both. So what you'll do is you'll make that prototype calendar, right? You'll schedule what your week looks like. And then it's not set in stone. Okay. So you're not a drill sergeant, you're a scientist. Okay. Big difference. A drill sergeant tells you what to do all day. A scientist makes hypotheses, runs tests, and sees how they go. And then they run more tests. So the idea here is that you ask yourself, hey, how did that schedule work out for me? Right? Do I need more time with my family? Do I need more time with my clients? Do I need less time doing this, less time doing that? Whatever the case might be, and you're going to adjust it for the day or the week ahead. What you don't want to do is adjust it in the day. Okay, once you set your schedule for the day, you got to stick to it. And if you fall off track, just pick up with the next time block. But once that's set, you want to stick with that time box calendar. But for tomorrow, hey, the day hasn't been set yet. You can change it to whatever you want. So I do this about once a week. My schedule's pretty fixed within a week's time. I know what's going to happen if, the week ahead. So every Sunday night, 8 p.m., I sit down. Takes me 15 minutes nowadays. I look at my Google Calendar and I make small adjustments. If I have a meeting there, a meeting here, and I make sure that I have my time box calendar for the week ahead. And then I look back the next Sunday and I say, okay, where should I have adjusted things for the next week to make it easier to follow that schedule?
So, thank you so much. That was fabulous.
Sure. Yeah. My pleasure.
I can't thank you enough, man. This is so awesome. And it was awesome to just learn from you today. And I'm inspired.
Oh, my pleasure.
I have so many
awesome.
little notes and quotes and these apps, and I can't wait to dig into this stuff. So yeah. And happy birthday to your daughter as well.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
12-year-old, 13. It's like teenager. It's got to feel great. So
it's crazy.
That's awesome. So, well, guys, if you don't mind, feel free to follow Nir on social media. We'll help anything we can do to help promote you for sure. And I hope you guys learned something. If you want, put a last quote in the chat that we're going to send to him. And Nir, thank you so much for joining the 6AMERS.
Oh, my pleasure.
It was awesome.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for waking up for me. And it's great to see you all. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Hope we didn't interrupt your bedtime, by the way.
No. We still got 5 minutes before my 10 p.m. bedtime.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. Right. Thank you, Emily.
Have
a great day.
Thank you so much.
Have an awesome day, guys. Thanks for listening to the 6AMERS podcast. If you liked what you heard on this episode, we would love to hear from you. So leave a comment and review, and don't forget to subscribe. For more information on our 6AMERS community, guests, book recommendations, and more, visit our website at the number 6AMERS.com, the6amers.com. We also invite you to follow us on Instagram for a daily dose of inspiration, motivation, and fun. See you next time.